Thank you for attending the Making Data-Driven Decisions webinar. At this time, I would like to introduce Paul Neal. Go ahead, Paul.
Hello, yes, and thank you so much, Valerie. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, speaking to you. Like Valerie said, we will be going over data-driven decisions anytime, anywhere, and for today, we will be learning how to use Kickstart. And so, let me. As many of you know, we have two different products. We have the Biz Connector, which is our connected solution, and then we also have the Biz Insights, which is the tool that you have as an add-in on your Excel spreadsheets. Well, without any connection to the database, or if you've purchased any bundles with us, you know that we have the two licenses. We have the live and the remotes. And then we also even have a standalone product. And we've gotten many questions from our customers. Okay, what do we do with these remote licenses? How do we utilize these to the best way? Also, it's standalone. Like how do you connect to data without these pre-built connectors? And so today, that's what I'm going to show you, how you can utilize connectors that are already built within your spreadsheet to really help you make those reports with more than just the data that you have pulling in. On top of being able to use the standalone, you can also use these connections to complement any Biz Connector product. So say a popular connector is Sage or Intact. So if you have Intact data, but you also have, say, CRM data somewhere else, and you can connect to it, you can bring that into Excel. You can use that to really cross-compare the two data sets. And so just to go over the agenda for today, to start what we're going to do, we're going to really define this data connection. Then we are going to meet Shay. So Shay is, I'll introduce her more later, but she's somebody with a problem that we're going to really help solve with these data connections. And then as we help Shay, we'll be going through the different types of connections, the ones within the spreadsheet, ones within the Excel framework, and also full external connections. Let's start with defining what is a data connection, just to give us a baseline on what we're looking for to connect with. And so the first thing about data connection, it seems a little obvious, but it's self-defining. It's a connection to your data. And then, but the thing about it is it's data that's missing from your original report. So you're trying to find information, just like that puzzle picture you have to the right, something's missing. You need something to make it complete. And then that brings us up to the last part. It's essential. I mean, you wouldn't bring in recipe information into your business report. So as a result, it's information that you actually need in order to really gain those insights, gain those data-driven decisions, and not just, it's look at your recipe cost versus your overall business maintenance cost. Now, how do we get to these data connections? The first step is we go into Excel. Excel, there is a tab. Now, it might look different depending on the version of Excel. I am going based off the assumption most of you have Excel 2016 or Office 365. And so with that, you simply click on the Data tab, and then you will then get this across the top of your workbook. And once you get to this, really, there's a lot of things you can do with the data, but what we're concerned about is on that far left side. So there's the get data, and that has all of the connectors. And then there's some prearranged connectors. If you really look closely, you can also see where there's existing connections and recent sources that you can look at. But we're really focusing on that far left side. All right, so now let's meet Shay. Who is Shay? Shay is a vice president of sales at her company, and her organization recently did a restructure. That to say, they cut her sales team significantly, and so as a result, he had to put in a sales incentive program to try and figure out or to try and really stimulate growth despite the lower workforce. So she is 2 years into a 3-year incentive program, really trying to keep that revenue growth going. Now, the reason I picked Shay is, again, a sales manager, not somebody that normally deals with a ton of data, so somebody that would typically be given your like the standalone license or an unconnected license to the database. It's like she doesn't need the database. Chances are she just needs the PDF reports. But in this case, she really needs to create the data, and here's why. Well, her board her executives have decided, hey, we need to really reevaluate this incentive program and see what's going on across the entire company. So they have really charged Shay with gathering a report together for them so that they can see the impact of this incentive program throughout the entire company. So that's where we're at. So Shay needs all these different types of data sources. So we're going to go through that with her today to build this report here for the board. So we're going to start with connections from within your data here, or connections within your spreadsheet. And so with that, the types of connections you can have is named ranges and tables, and you can reference cells as well. I'm specifically talking about named ranges and tables because they mention those on that data connection tab. And so what named ranges are, it's a range of cells that you assign a name to. It's like a group that you say, okay, this is region data, this is state data, and things such as that. But that's kind of as far as it goes. And it's really useful for function reference, like index match, VLOOKUP, things such as that. That way Excel knows to kind of limit where it's looking to a specific group of cells and not an entire tab on your spreadsheet. So that's important. And then, once you do that, it pretty much stops. There's no formatting, no extra functionality, so that's kind of what it is. Whereas tables, you can also reference those in a function, but you can get different colors with those, got lots of different options. For those of you who are more technical minded, it is an XML table embedded within your spreadsheet. Another reason I really bring this up is because your table, or all of these data connections, will come in as a table. So whenever you see that, we'll reference it. And on top of that, another significance about these two items is if you have a named range or a table already existing in your workbook, you can select those as data sources in BizInsight to utilize those for your reports. So now let's switch on over to Excel here. And here we have our executive reports. And so here what I have in front of you is, so Shay, whenever she did, he assigned all the regions by states according to she made the assignments for the regions for each state in her own spreadsheets. So that's where we're starting with this with Shay. But what I've done here to show you named range is I've actually made this a named range. Notice that I have to click on the entire range in order to reference it. But if I were to make a VLOOKUP, let's say I do VLOOKUP actually in this case would not work because it does have to go all the way right to left, but I could do an index match based off of this, and I could reference it. So let's just say, hey, I want to reference it, and note a little symbol with two blue cells and then white cells all around it, signifying that's a named range. So that's how you would get that. And then also, let's say I wanted to create this as a table. There's a couple of different ways you could do that. You could say format as table right here, click your style, or you could press Control T. If your table is headers, definitely let that be clicked. It's okay. Now you got all this nice pretty formatting. But on top of that, let's do a quick sum if to show you the additional functionality that you get from a table but not from a named range. So the range here, so if I get, let me see, you can always figure out what your table is named here. You can rename it. So this one's just table 1. It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. So equals sum if, and the range is table 1. So by pressing tab, I select the whole table. But if I wanted to select just a column, so I press that little bracket button there, the under bracket, not the curly brace. And so now I can go to any of these columns. So if I want to say 2017 sales is what I want to sum, or if hey, this is a sum if, so I want to sum a specific region. Okay, and then criteria, let's say northeast, and then the actual sum, again, in sum range, table 1, I'm going to use the bracket. Now, and then last part, gonna put that in, and then now I have my sum if formula. So this combines all of these northeast for 2018 sales, for the column of 2018 sales. And so looking here, I'm verifying that this number is actually correct. As another fun little trick, you can select multiple cells. It gives you a few statistics right there. So we have that functionality as well. So let's undo a couple things and just to show you on BizInsight. So we need to select this as a data source. And so with selecting things as a data source, we can do as a range of cells. So I could select this right here, or if I wanted to, let's actually go back, select an existing name range, and you'll notice it pops up. And then I can control the format of what it is. And once you put it in there, you can do anything you need to here. So number, text, date and time, not just date, date, time, Boolean, that true or false format as well. So that's what you can do as table. And I appreciate you bearing with me. I know that's a lot to kind of take in, but that's the process that you would be using to build this report. So to just go on, so now Shay has her list here, and we've selected that. We've brought that into, okay. And so we've brought that into our data sets. That's next. Okay, and so now it's loaded, and now we can reference it in any of our items. We just have to press Excel is where our data is. You'll notice the data source already pops up because it's the only one. When there are more than one, you'll have multiple options. Okay, and again, I appreciate you bearing with me on that part. So for this So that's how the named ranges and tables work. So going back to our slideshow. All right. And so slideshow, now we're going into outside of our spreadsheet, but within that same Excel ecosystem here. Other workbooks. You can connect to other Excel files or kind of text/CSV type files. I'm not sure if you noticed, but those are also available. So for other workbooks, the thing about this is when you bring this data in, and this goes for any of these connections, it is read only. So you don't have the ability to write back unless it's a special add-in, but it's for all of these standard connections, it's read only. So if you bring it in, you kind of play with the numbers, you don't have the ability to mess up somebody else's work. So that's great. And on top of that, it's refreshable. And so say you have a shared workbook in a network location that everybody can get to, and you just have one person in charge of updating it. They have it password protected. Other people can reference that workbook to get the data. And then as things change, when it's updated, they can click refresh, and it would go ahead and refresh as well. It's useful for shared documents. As I mentioned, you have that location, you have these few people in charge of taking care of that data, and then all these different people that can pull from it to get the information they need, all without interrupting what you already have. So now, just going into this special thing about CSV. CSV is an easily read document. It's like a text document, but CSV stands for comma separated values. If you didn't know that already, it's just what it does is it converts it to text and puts each record or each row on its specific line, like you would see in the spreadsheet, but what it does is it separates the columns with those commas. So if you were just reading a CSV just on a blank document, it would look very confusing, but it's easy for Excel to read, and it is an extremely common export. I put the bank here as well as Fitbit. If you're looking to analyze Fitbit data, it's a great export. If you want to do your bank information, it's a great export, but also CRM data, so common for that. So a lot of things use this as its export to data. And the one thing about this is that this is the only data source we will be going over today that is not refreshable. So CSV, because it's just a blank text file, it's not refreshable unless you change the file. Let's show you how we would bring in a CSV connection. So data, as I said, text CSV, it's grouped in the same thing, partially because they are very similar. So we have the text from text CSV, little button, it's special little shortcuts that this version of Excel already has. But then we also have, I'm sorry, let me retrack. Okay, so we press that button, it brings up our file explorer. So once we do that, we go to the place where we're wanting to pull this CSV from, and then click on it. For this one, I'm going to import the CSV data. Notice the text files. This is because text and CSV, like I said, they're the same. They're just separated, one separated by columns, one separated by tabs or spaces. It's a long, fun rabbit hole if you want to research it. And so this one, I select import, and then it buzzes around. So I think this is where was before, so the screen that I brought up. So this one, it gives you a preview for all of these things that are coming from outside the spreadsheet. Gives you a nice good preview to say, okay, what's going on. Notice for any text or CSV range, it will tell you a delimiter. Delimiters essentially, okay, what is separating these values from each other? So that's what that's based off of. And again, nice long rabbit hole if you want to get into the file origin part. That's fun. But for Shay's purposes, this will do perfectly. Notice on the load as well, you have options for the load too. Just really going into all of your different possibilities. There's table you can go ahead and put in, pivot table, pivot chart, create the connection only, and then the data model. Oh, data model's a fun thing that you can get into as well. But for this purpose, we just want it in a new spreadsheet, and press OK, just like that, bringing it, and ta-da, there it is. Notice, like I said, it comes in a table format. And you see this little side pane for queries and connections pops out right here. It's actually a query, not technically a connection for this one. And then I can rename the table, but it has full table functionality. Let's make this guy blue, just because we're BizNet, we really like the blue. And so now we have that pulled in, and once again, we can bring it in, select data. I won't go through this every time, but just to show you what it looks like. Notice we even have blank columns, so we could exclude that. And that's something whenever you go in to edit it, if for whatever reason it's bringing in blank columns, bringing in things you don't want, you're able to edit those out. That's how you pull in a data connection. And so I'll try to go a little bit faster through these since you know the process now. So going back, and again, Valerie, please let me know if this does not pull up. So here we should be on our, on our slideshow. Okay. And so we've just gone through the CSV files. Now let's go to some connections outside the Microsoft's, or not, outside the Excel options here. Outside the Excel ecosystem. One is to a SQL database. And so significance of a SQL database, what is it? It's your relational database. Most of your ERP systems are built on some sort of a SQL database. It stands for Structured Query Language. It's one of the coding languages that really formats everything. And it can integrate with just about everything under the planet. And so, especially with Excel. So you see that little relationship there. That's like two servers talking to each other. There are multiple types of SQL databases. The one in that bottom left is your Microsoft SQL. That's going to be probably 90% of you. But then there's also MySQL and PostgreSQL, which those can connect with Excel as well. Now, security is the last point I have on there. And the thing about security is if you are pulling from a specific table, you have a database administrator that will most likely need to give you access to this table or to the view that you are trying to look at. So there's options for that as well, but that's something to definitely coordinate with your IT as for that. And so, here we go. And so going back to our spreadsheet with this and just going into how we connect to that database. So for this one, instead of selecting one of these options, we actually go into the Get Data. There's a special database section. As I said, there's MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle. It's a popular database as well, Access even. And so for this one, we'll just go into SQL. Because it's a Microsoft SQL-based system. So here I have a server on my computer, and then I have my own little database. Or actually, you know what? I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to log into the server. Now, most people have to put in their credentials as well. I did not, since I've already logged into this, and you'll notice it not only gives me all of my databases here, but I can click down and it will give me a preview for all of the tables. And this little 2-window symbol, that is actually a special view, which that's tables combined together for relevant data that they couldn't keep together in tables for specific purposes. So just wanted to show you that real quick. So just going back up. As you can see, there's a lot of processing going into everything, so it is a little difficult. But then here's the symbol for table. So all that to say, just expect delays on these. So if I go here, I want the sales numbers database. Say okay, and so if I load this, yes, I get the sales numbers, but I also get a lot of numbers that Shay, our VP of sales, does not want. She doesn't want what's going on and with all of these. She doesn't need to know the lead source and all of these things. So she doesn't want to load this into her spreadsheet and bog down her reports. And so at this point, we can press cancel. And so she goes back to her IT and says, okay, what's going on? Or how can I condense this to the columns that I need? Her IT asks her, okay, what columns do you need? So she tells them, and what they do is they actually give her an SQL query for her to use. So again, to use a query, it's a really cool feature. The only thing is you do have to put in the database that you want. Then you click down on that advanced options. And so what I'm going to do, grab this, copy, paste, just press OK, and Excel will execute that query to pull in only the data that you need. So now that we have all the relevant data, we press OK, ta-da, we have that in our spreadsheet. So that's how you pull in the SQL database. So moving on. Okay. All right. So moving on, our next connection is going to be OData. And this is one of multiple options. I'll go through a lot of other external connections and their pros and cons for each. But I'm choosing OData because it is a very popular one. It's kind of an up-and-coming one. So it's short for Open Data Protocol. It's what OData is. It's based off of REST API, if you know what that is. It sits there or in a hub, and it's if you have the credentials for it and you have the service for it, it's very useful and very powerful as well. So I know a lot of Microsoft products, like Microsoft Dynamics products, use it. Azure products use it. So it's extremely useful. And so clicking on this little animation, this little GIF from Black Panther, I chose this because it's very similar to what OData is like. It's kind of out there on the World Wide Web. Nobody knows what it is unless they're looking for it and they have the credentials. Just like in the movie Black Panther, it looked like a hillside that they were flying into, and you thought they were going to crash, but lo and behold, they were going into Wakanda. So that's your fun little Marvel thing here. So how is it different from just using a database? So here's how it's different. Your regular database, you have your analyst sending a query from his or her computer, then they get back the data there. But with this one, analysts would make an OData call, and OData service converts the database into an online type system. and then sends back the data in the same format that you would get it. And so the reason that this is valuable is if you have an OData service, you're a traveling user, or say for whatever reason you don't have access, direct access to your database, and your IT really doesn't feel comfortable giving you that many people access to that database, then this would be a great alternative because they can pick and choose essentially what you can get from that. They can guide you, just like they did with Jay in that specific query. They can give you a specific URL to get your data from. And so what I'm saying here with Shay is there's customer shipping information that she doesn't have access to. Nobody wants to give her access to that, but she just needs it for this one report. So their alternative, instead of giving her access to a ton of data, is essentially letting her use an OData connection. And so that's where we're going now. Make sure, yep, looks like it pulled over this. All right, and so OData connection. All right, and with this one, you should be able, I believe we'll be able to see credentials used possible. Again, you go to this get data query, and there's online services. Like I said, there's that Dynamics that we use. There's Salesforce and Facebook as well. And then there's these other services. I'll go over things like ODBC later, but for our purposes, we want this OData feed. And so from here, we put in the URL, we press OK. We'll see if it, okay, so it saved my credentials, but normally it does kind of pop up to say you need specific credentials, and you have everything here. You have the data that you need. You can edit out some of these true false things that you don't need for time's sake, because I do believe we're going a little long. I'm just going to press load to show you. It pulls in just like all of these. Now, notice it also says query 1, query 2 to change that. There's multiple ways you can do that. You can right-click right here, edit it, do the rename as well. But it, you know, just because it's in there doesn't mean in your spreadsheet doesn't mean it's final. So once you've got that, so Shay has all this information in, has the shipping information in. Now she's ready to make the reports. And so just to kind of show you, since this isn't a report making class, I'm going to, do I not have that up? Okay. I'm going to actually show, come on now, what the report she made here, and then, okay. All right, and so this is her sales incentive impact reports from 2017, 2018, last couple of years. And so notice she made her sales versus projections. She cross-compared the projections she had made in her spreadsheets versus the actual sales numbers from the database. She used the conversion rates from the CRM CSV, and then she made a little table for the OData based off of the different product lines. And so with this, she was able to make a complete report from every part of her organization using different data connections without having to say, well, I mean, you just gonna have to give it to me, you're gonna have to trust me with it. And then the best part about this, other than the CRM CSV, which technically they could replace and combine that, and you can make that to where it's refreshable, but these two are very refreshable. So if any of this information changes, say she makes the report today, but her board meeting is not until next Monday, she could go up to BizInsight, say refresh workbooks, and it would refresh with the data. So for my example, data is not really changing, but if it does change, you're able to update it based off of that information. So that is the final report that Shay made. She's happy. Her board's happy with the report. This is the report that Shay made. Internal data versus her SQL data with this chart here. This chart's with her CRM data, and then the OData connection she made that bottom table with. So, all right, and that's how that report was made. And so just going back to our PowerPoint, oh, nope, other one. All right. Okay. So okay. So now just going into other external connections that you have. So I have here 3 different source types that are completely external Excel, outside of the Excel framework, and they're all 3 pretty common. Like I said, ODBC is common. It's really reliable, really simple, but problem is that I found is just you have to configure an ODBC to a specific source. Now, like if you have a specific data set that you need to send or that you need to be connected to all the time, an ODBC driver is perfect. But if you need multiple things, then it might not be the best route for you if you need some more flexibility. OData service, it's great. It can be queried, growing popularity. I think Salesforce as well has invested in this technology in my research. So you have 2 giants, Microsoft and Salesforce, that love this technology. The problem is it's code-based. To make your own is very difficult. So it's not widely available. You're really dependent on that service. But there are services you can pay for that essentially make it easier for you. Then the last is web tables. I mean, web tables are available everywhere. You can log into or click on a website. I use this for my fantasy football. I know not. You can use this for stocks as well, and they're available everywhere. The problem is Excel really only reads the HTML tables. To know if their HTML is, if you go into a table and you change the table type, say if you're looking at stocks, looking at technology sector versus manufacturing sectors, something to that extent, if that's the type of table you're looking at bringing in and you're wondering if it's HTML, if you change the type, look and see if the actual address changes in your browser. If it does, it's HTML. If not, it's JSON, JavaScript, object notation, most likely. Then it's not, essentially Excel will not be able to pull it in. And also inconsistent quality, and they are never named. You always get table 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's frustrating. That preview that I showed you for the CSV comes in very handy for those. So with that, I'll just kind of leave you with these important steps on how to really utilize your data. You import that into your spreadsheet, you select it with BizInsight, and then you rock your report. Like Shay, essentially Shay was able to converge these 3 things all without having the Biz Connector product. So even though maybe it would have made it easier on 1 or 2 steps, she was still able to really impress her executives with the report that she made.